Hi everyone, welcome back to the ArchAdemia podcast. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Victoria Farrow, who is subject lead in architecture at the Montfort University. Victoria is also the chair of the BIM Series charity and is the events coordinator for the Association of Architectural Educators. It is our pleasure to have her joining us today. Hi Victoria, thanks for agreeing to come onto the podcast today. I just wanted to start by giving our audience a bit of an insight into yourself, how you've come to be in the positions that you're in, but right from the beginning, just about your life and how you started out in architecture.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Hull, a small kind of fishing town up north, where I spent 18 years of my life, and then I kind of embarked on the journey of architecture. It wasn't really planned. So I did art, French and Spanish for my A-levels. And I literally sat down and searched through the UCAS book, which in those days was not online, it was paper. So I sat looking through the catalogue of every single art and design subject that there was. And my dad is an architect, self-made.
Oh.
He's now 70, kind of still working in practice. Every day gets up at 7 and goes in the office. So my dad is an architect. I think secretly, he'd always hoped that I would take over the family business. So when I'd kind of exhausted every single other course that was not architecture, because I was quite stubborn, he suggested, why don't you start doing architecture? So I huffed and puffed a bit and then said, fine, okay, and kind of put it on my UCAS forms and submitted it off. And it went off to, I think I applied to Glasgow, Kingston, Nottingham, Liverpool, Manchester and Nottingham. And I got offers from all of them, and it kind of then began on the kind of going around all of the open days. And Nottingham University really appealed to me, not because of the course, because I hadn't looked in depth at it, which is terrible to say, but mostly because I really liked the green campus. So it's really, I'm a big runner. So I was like, I could picture myself running around this campus. So off I went to Nottingham University, and I didn't have a brilliant time. I actually really didn't enjoy my undergraduate studies, and I finished in third year, kind of did graduation and decided I'll take my placement year, but wasn't quite sure if I wanted to go back. But I had a really lovely placement, a very supportive practice in Nottingham who were brilliant mentors, and I found some confidence, and so I decided, I'll go back and do my part 2. But it was an interesting time because it was at a time where lots of schools of architecture had lost their accreditation in the UK. So the courses that I was looking at, I was going along to open days and then been told, actually, we don't have our IBA accreditation. So I ended up going back to Nottingham University, which I'd said I wouldn't do. Thankfully, my MArch was much more enjoyable. And I think it's because I'd found some confidence. I think for young students going into architecture, particularly in those times, because that was early 2000s, it's quite a harsh shock to reality. So reviews were quite tough. It was kind of open critique of your work. I found that quite kind of hard to adjust to. So undergraduate had felt very raw, but postgrad had felt much more kind of enjoyable. And so I stayed at Nottingham University to do my part 2 and my part 3. So I did all my 7 years there. And then I qualified as an architect. And that was at the time where there was a 2008 crash. So I had a job as an architect for 1 month and then I got made redundant. So,
that's some of us, isn't it?
I remember it well.
Yeah. Yeah. So the kind of route into architecture felt quite rough. And I have to say, at that point, when I got made redundant, I thought, I'm just done with architecture now. I've had enough. I took some temporary work. So I worked at Nando's, I worked for the council, I worked a bit for the NHS. Just anything really to bring some money in whilst I figured out, what I wanted to do. But in the end, I decided to set up my own business, my own practice. And I got a job 3 days a week doing facilities management in a local company in Nottingham, whilst I started to build my own practice. And it was at that point where I got an invitation to go and do some reviews at Lincoln University. it wasn't directed at me. It was kind of an open call. And I just replied and thought I'll go along. And I had the best day. It was really nice to be on the other side of the panel. So not to be the student kind of presenting the work and feeling that kind of sick feeling that I had as a student, but actually to be on the other side, giving constructive feedback, but being able to deliver it in a way that I would have loved to have had as a student. And talking to the students at the time, they were so grateful and had really said they'd benefited from my help. And I left with such a smile on my face. I thought, I never felt that way before in work. So I started to, I quite quickly got into running I was offered the opportunity to run a third year studio at Lincoln University a couple of months later, which I took. And then because of that, it triggered me contacting Nottingham Trent University to see if they had anything going, because I just discovered this huge passion and love for teaching. It was all motivated, I think, by my own experience as a student and that undergraduate time where I'd been so unhappy. I was so passionate about just wanting to make sure that my students never felt like that. And kind of that was the beginning of my journey into wanting to make positive change to architectural education. So I started at Nottingham Trent as a part-time lecturer. And that was a really exciting time because Nottingham Trent had just had the architecture course running for a year. So it was at a time of change and it was growing and it was all really exciting. You could kind of put your own imprint onto modules and developing first year studio, which was what I was really interested in. And I became full-time as an academic in 2012, I think. And during my time at Nottingham Trent, I had the opportunity to go to America to go to the National Conference of the Beginning Design Student, which was a kind of travelling conference. So schools of architecture put themselves forward to run the conference, host it at their school. And it's a kind of showcase of projects and practice in architectural education in America. So I'd never seen anything like that before because it was a time Instagram came in 2011. So it was pre social media, being able to share work from what's going on the inside of schools of architecture. Really, you only got to see the final work at a degree show. So when I went there and you got to see the inner workings of architectural education and the projects and practice that was going on all around, well, sometimes it was all around the world at these conferences. I went to one in Nebraska. I was absolutely amazed. I thought, oh my God, this is fantastic. But we didn't have anything like it in the UK. There was nothing which brought architectural educators collectively together in the same way. So when I returned back from that Nebraska trip, myself and 3 or 4 other colleagues got together and we formed what is now the Association of Architectural Educators, which is a group that represents architectural educators in the UK. And there's now, I think we have 57 member schools of architecture as part of the AAE, and there's an annual conference, and still today the only journal in architectural education in the UK, Charette. So I offered to run the first conference in 2013. I was really green. I was in my late 20s, had no idea what I was doing. I just put my hand up and said, yeah, I'll do it. But it was really great. And it was a real celebration. Hosted at Nottingham Trent, had kind of people from all over the world coming to present on their practice and projects in architectural education. And that was the beginning of the AAE, which I'm hugely proud of. So yeah, then I left Nottingham Trent University and moved to Birmingham City University, mostly for the reasons of career progression. I absolutely loved Nottingham Trent when I was there, and it's a great team. But I moved to BCU for a kind of new challenge, and I took the role as course leader and head of year one at Birmingham City University, which at the time was Birmingham School of Architecture. It wasn't Birmingham School of Architecture and Design. So again, I joined a school that was growing and developing, and within 1 month of being there, I got told I had to rewrite the course. So I joined in October 2014. And I just remember this. There was I think it was the Dean's PA came behind my seat in the office and just said, "Oh, by the way, do you know the new course has got to be rewritten by next month?" And I was like, "Oh my God." So I had a really steep learning curve when I got to BCU, but I wouldn't change it. It was absolutely fantastic. I had a really excellent mentor, the head of school at the time, Kevin Singh, who's now at MMU. It was very empowering, and it was a great time to begin as a course leader and also have a foot in leading year one. So I spent just under 10 years at BCU, and then in the summer of this year moved to take the role of subject lead in architecture at LSA, Leicester School of Architecture. That brings me to today.
What a journey.
Yeah, it has. It has been a real journey, but I think what I've kept really close and I've gripped onto is wherever I go as a job, what's most important to me is that they really have the student experience and the care about students at the heart of it all. And also that I've stayed true to wanting to, wherever I am, make improvements to architectural education. I don't want to stay static. And if I get to a point where I feel like I'm not able to make any more impact, which is maybe why I moved. I felt like I'd done everything I could at BCU and it was time for a change. But I've always tried to grip onto that, and I'll continue that as I go forwards.
I think that's one thing in the handful of conversations I've had with you so far. That's one thing I've grasped straight away about your character is that, and you mentioned it in the call that we had a couple of weeks ago, is that you're always trying to push innovation and you're always trying to stay ahead with how we can change architectural education for the better. And that definitely comes across, obviously, in your career path so far and how passionately you talk about it. I mean, you guys must be sort of inside, you must be able to resonate with Victoria's story quite a lot, because ArchAdemia has been born out of sort of a similar feeling of you guys really struggled in the BA and the feeling that you had of that, of doing that initial degree. That was why you wanted to start ArchAdemia and why we've got the company to where it is today.
Yeah, well, I'd say the negative experience of the BA, similar to you, Victoria, that shaped it, because we were at a real crossroads with learning software at the time. So not so much the theory, that's confusing enough at the degree level, but at the time we were expected to learn AutoCAD, SketchUp and Revit and that weren't a thing at the time, and there just wasn't enough support. You done a few workshops, but then you were left to your own devices, and you sort of need the support to continue throughout your career progression in when you're learning the software. And that did sort of shape where we're at now with ArchAdemia, coupled with the fact that we kept taking on staff and they were asking the same questions each time. So we just started recording our screens to streamline the process. And then we were like, this is really useful. And then it grew from there, really, didn't it, Adam?
Mm-hmm. But then I admire the way you said, Victoria, that you had a negative experience and it drove you to, change that experience for others. And that's the exact same origins for us. But another realization we had in the Arch was the fact that the better your skill set was, the more time you could spend on design and theory and exploring things, testing things. And we had so much more confidence in the masters, didn't we? That we were like, we can leave that to the last week now because we know we can produce it all in a week. Whereas you're worried about production all the way through in your degree. So that was another thing that we tried to focus on was we tell people, whether it's staff or members of ArchAdemia, we say to them, get your skills spot on, get that confidence in your own ability and your own time frames, and then you can just enjoy things so much more. You can actually enjoy, I love the way you said about, making it a nice experience. I was exactly the same as you. I didn't enjoy even though I got better marks in the degree than I did the masters, I enjoyed the masters so much more because I was just, as you say, just well more prepared. You knew what you're getting yourself into. There's just nothing that prepares you. Even drawing, just to plug a new course that we've just put on, a hand drawing course. The first time picking up a rotring pen and all that, I was just like, what do I do with one of these? So, I think we do share that same sort of motivation.
We used to sort of let...
Yeah.
Our shortfalls would shape the building design, because if there was a building we wanted to design but we couldn't model it or draw it, we'd draw something simpler.
We went down a different path, didn't we?
But by masters, that wasn't really the case, because we were a lot more fluent and literate in all the software.
And every student's individual, and I remember particularly between the two of you guys, Jack, you studied art, didn't you, in sixth form and at GCSE level at the time, and when we got into university, you brought in a hand sketch of an Escher drawing, didn't you? The man with the sphere. And it was an amazing drawing. I always remember, Adam, you seeing that drawing, didn't you? And it totally sort of overwhelmed you, didn't you? You were like, how am I?
I was like, if this is the level of art I need to be at, I've got no chance.
Yeah. So it's like different students, every individual will need like help with different skills. And you sometimes, it's not just the tutors that can be overawing, it's the students next to you. You see what they're producing, and sometimes you feel like, wow, I can't get near that. Am I on the wrong course and stuff? But everyone needs to know, no, that's not the case. You can still do it. Just because you're not the best hand drawer in the world doesn't mean you're not going to do well at architecture. There are other ways to, in which you can excel. I remember that specifically with you guys.
Yeah. And one other thing as well, Victoria, we're very similar, is I've done a few guest crits at Liverpool John Moores, and you absolutely nailed it by saying you made a conscious effort to give critique that you wish you had when you were there, and that was exactly what I did. And I was bombarded at the end of the day. They were saying to me, oh my God, like the stuff I was giving them was very straight shoot, stuff. Sometimes it was like, your design's nice, but your presentation's poor. If you lift your presentation to this sort of level, you'd be showing your design off that bit more. And then they'd say, well, how do I do that? And I'd say, well, try this, this and this, real practical, direct advice. At the end of the day, they were like, wow, that's all I needed. And then I'd go maybe few months later, you'd see the same group and you'd see that they took on those comments. Where then I was sat with the course leader, John Moores, and then he was given very different advice. So we didn't half compliment each other, because I don't consider myself the most well-read of architects. So that's what Ian was doing. He was giving them loads of precedents, loads of good examples. Then I was just tying it in with a bit more practical skill set type stuff. So it worked really well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember when I was taught software at university, it was like I can remember it to this day. It was in year 2. We just got handed an ArchiCAD CD and it was like, off you go. And I was like, oh my God. And that was it, wasn't it? And at the time, I remember my dad saying, it's teach yourself architecture, because half the time I was coming home in tears with him trying to teach me how to draw a plan, section, elevation. Thankfully, it's not like that anymore. And I'm proud to say that, all of the universities that I've had contact with, taught at, done, reviews with, it's been a really supportive environment, a really kind of nice learning environment. And having taught first year for, oh my God, a long time, since, like 2009, 10, probably started teaching first year. 11, I started running first year. So way over 10 years. You get so many different students from different backgrounds, and they do walk in with that concern that, if they can't draw, if they haven't done art and design before coming to university, is that going to be a problem? But you will find now that all of the architecture courses do build in that kind of cushion when they join, and there's that scaffolding around accepting that, not all of the cohort will come in with art and design background or been able to draw, and it's just reassuring first years that it's okay. But I also do take the practical approach. I think they welcome that. So I will sit down with students and kind of say, no, that drawing is a bit ugly, and they'll giggle, and we'll have a giggle together, and then we'll kind of work out how to progress that, and kind of give them helpful tips of how to improve it. But it's about making them feel comfortable and confident. That the confidence and being happy is absolutely crucial, I think, in architectural education. Because if you're not happy, you can't learn. And if you don't feel confident, you just can't grow as a designer. And so if the environment is not right, then that's going to be a real hindrance.
Well, that neatly brings me on to the next thing that I wanted to touch on, and that is currently your role at LSA. So now as subject lead in architecture, what's that like day to day? Have you got like a long-term goal for the course that you want to achieve? And in terms of like, we've obviously been away from being students for a while now. So what is the student experience like? What is like sort of the landscape of architectural education at the moment? I know obviously it's moving quick, and obviously we touch on some of the ARB stuff a little bit further into the podcast, but just in terms of your role now, what's it been like?
Yeah, so I took 2 months off after BCU. I think I was actually suffering a bit of burnout because academia is it often gets a kind of bad rap, I feel. I read on social media some of the comments that you get about being in education, that it's easy and you get these long holidays. You really don't. As an academic, it's full on. It is constant. Sometimes you can be working weekends, evenings, 24/7 easily. And I think after BCU, I was definitely suffering a bit of burnout from just the kind of constant pressures. And so I took a couple of months out to breathe, and then started at the Leicester School of Architecture. I'd taken a long time looking around at jobs. I'd probably been looking for a few years just at what might be the right fit for me. So I wanted something that was not too far away, but also had the same values in terms of student experience and putting students right at the heart of it all, which I'm proud to say Leicester School of Architecture really does. Like the experience that students get is a conversation that is daily. So that was very important to me. And the staff team as well are very welcoming. It's a very nice, warm environment, very friendly. So it was a lovely environment to walk into. They're coming through a period of change. So a number of staff departures had happened last year. New course, new curriculum, which was really exciting to me. So the school is managed by, the Leicester School of Architecture sits within the School of Art, Design and Humanities. So that school is managed by Kate Chain, who took over as head of school in the pandemic, so in 2020. So obviously we had all of that kind of change to manage within architectural education, and the backlash, which we are still seeing kind of consequences of, particularly with like mental health crisis and financial crisis. Yeah. So they come through all of that, staff changes and this new curriculum at BA Architecture, which is hugely exciting. So it's kind of all inspired from sustainability and achieving that through ethics, regenerative practice and environmental justice. So it's been a really nice role to step into. Obviously, I'm now managing, I've gone from kind of course leader and associate professor at BCU. I'm now associate professor and managing part 1, 2 and 3. I'm very much embedded in part 1 at the moment, mostly because that has the new curriculum and it's had come through that period of change. So we're focused on building that new curriculum and kind of developing the ethos of the course. There's a new course leader who is fantastic, hugely passionate about students. So we are getting on very well in kind of implementing the vision of, I want to make the Leicester School of Architecture the beacon for the Midlands ideal. That's my first goal for EDI is something I'm incredibly passionate about. I think as I get older and move through my career, I've noticed a shift from being fascinated and very interested in first year education and architectural pedagogy. So the teaching of architectural education, I'm still very passionate about that. But as I move through my career and I suppose the students that I'm dealing with broadens, I'm becoming much more of an activist and very interested in equality, diversity and inclusion. So I'm head of EDI at LSA. And that has been a big motivation. And it's kind of, I think that is coming from feedback that I'm getting from students and graduates about issues within the profession and issues that I'm seeing myself. So that's things like kind of pay and issues of mistreatment and EDI within the profession. So I've started to focus my efforts a bit more on the gap between having graduated as a student, so coming out of year 3 and then into the profession, and also coming out of MArch and into the profession at that point. Those placement years for me are becoming more and more on my radar and things that I'm looking at, because I think at the moment they're problematic. There's lots of issues, students struggling to get jobs, and also feeding back to me about bullying and mistreatment, low pay. All of those things upset me. When you've carried a graduate and managed them through 3 years of the course, and then they go out and they either can't get a job, or they get a job and it's really low paid, or they get badly treated, that makes me quite angry. And that's where I'm starting to kind of focus my efforts. And so EDI within the Leicester School of Architecture is top priority. And that kind of hits, I suppose, with the students that we get. They're majority from barmaid backgrounds, low paid incomes, families of underprivileged. So that's really important. That's where I'm at the moment.
Yeah. Thank God they've got you in the corner. And obviously, we'll touch on some of the Architecture Plus stuff further down as well, which I guess is kind of related to that thing, because that's something that you're bringing forward that I think is going to be hugely successful, because the industry is in a bit of a spot of bother at the moment, I think, especially for when you're just stepping out. I mean, when you've got 5-6 years experience in practice behind you, it's easier to go out and find jobs and to voice your opinion about these things. But I think sometimes when you just step out of BA or you step out of MArch, you're still looked at as someone who hasn't really got any idea about the industry. So sometimes your opinions fall on deaf ears. So to have someone like yourself in the positions that you hold, championing that, that's fantastic. And I know you were getting a bit of, what's the best word to use? You were getting challenged on LinkedIn, let's call it challenged, by somebody on LinkedIn about EDI the other day. But I think it's easy for some people to dismiss, but when you're in the thick of it and seeing the issue at its beginnings, it resonates with you more. So you're the closest sort of position that you can be to it. I think sometimes practice leaders and other people in the industry, they're detached from it a little bit more because you don't see that journey and you don't particularly see how hard it is for those students coming out now.
Yeah, and I suppose it's very easy to blame the person before, isn't it? You know, sometimes it happens. You see sometimes it happens, first year conversations in architecture, you know, there might be a tendency to blame the schools, or second year tutors might have a conversation and kind of blame first year leaders. Oh, you know, they didn't teach them this in first year. Third year leaders, you know, oh, they didn't learn this in first and second year, so now we're having to do it. But actually the responsibility is for the whole. And what I get quite tired of is reading comments from practitioners who are blaming education and actually not taking any responsibility for continuing that mentoring. It's really, really important. These students, they're coming into education now, and it's a completely different world to when I came into education. And totally different challenges, totally different technologies. And we are reacting to that in education, and we're managing them from first year and gradually growing their confidence. And they exit very highly skilled, hardworking, enthusiastic, motivated, innovative, creative people. And that I don't feel it's always valued when they go into the profession. And worse, when they are in an environment where they've been asked to work, you know, long hours for incredibly low pay. And it is really problematic. It does really frustrate me. It really, really does.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you can tell. Sorry.
Well, I'll be very, very careful. I won't name names, but we've got a friend who worked at a practice after his BA, and the environment was awful in that practice, similar to what you just touched on. And he ended up becoming a maths teacher, and it just completely put him off the industry. And he was a fantastic student, top marks, and the first practice he entered put him off the industry completely. And it was because of that environment. So it's exactly the point you're touching on. The entire industry may have, missed out on a real talent there because of that first interaction with industry. And it's something that we've been trying to push with limited success. Is we think a gap and opportunity in education is interaction with local practices. We would love to engage with our 2 local universities and just give insight. And we do our absolute best. I got knocked back for work experience when I was like 16, and I was livid. I always said, if anyone ever asks for experience, I would always give it. So we always give 2 weeks, maybe 1 week, depending on how busy we are. But we always give people experience. And to just see behind the curtain for just even a short spell, it opens your eyes. I think it gives you that little bit of preparation. I think it helps bridge the gap. So yeah, it's just something we're equally as passionate about. And as I say, it was heartbreaking to see a friend of ours say, if that's what practice is like, I don't want to do it. And he was wrong, really. Truth be told, it was just a bad impression. Whereas I think the general average of practices, I can reel off 50 firms now that I know for a fact are good places to work. But you could just have that negative impression, couldn't you? And it puts you off for life. So it's a shame. So yeah, we'd like to help you on that mission.
We actually covered it with Sana as well, didn't we, in a previous podcast? Because she was fresh out of the industry and she had a lot of the same gripes, effectively. And it was good to hear her point of view from a student, how she was feeling in that type of scenario.
I was just going to say, there are so many practices who are doing amazing good things and so giving in their time, get brilliant practitioners coming in to do guest critic work, fantastic, so supportive. And it's such a shame that the few are kind of letting the profession down, and it's a shame that students having to experience that. And I think there needs to be just much more rigorous control or following through on kind of bad experience feedback. That's why I was concerned about the new ARB changes, because yes, it addresses, and by this I'm talking about the kind of removal of part 1, it addresses the kind of broadening the scope of people who can come into architecture, so it could potentially kind of make for a more flexible courses and a way in. But what are we doing to tackle when these students coming out? There's nothing that's addressing these issues within the profession. So whilst we might be more diverse and inclusive, welcoming people in the door to architecture, which I think is brilliant, what are we doing within the profession? What is ARB doing within the profession to tackle those issues of mistreatment and low pay? That is my concern at the moment.
Yeah. And just touching on the ARB, how are you finding? So you just touched on obviously the plan changes that are going to be coming in. We're quite late, to be honest, in this, so we obviously are aware of some of the changes, but it hasn't directly affected us in a way yet that we've become pretty well read on it. But it is something that we are trying to sort of catch up on a little bit more. But for you, obviously, it must be really pressing because it's going to directly affect you guys from, I think it's September 24. So how are you guys dealing with it?
So there is a number of new changes that have come in. So schools of architecture are now been asked to pay a fee to ARB, which is £9,000 and something pounds, I think. That will come in from September 2024. I'm in an interesting position because obviously I'm part of the AAE, so that's the body of architectural education, architectural educators. So I'm party to those conversations and kind of sentiments. And then I was also able to go to the Heads of Schools conference in November, and engage with other heads of schools. And there's really mixed feedback about the fees. I think the biggest concern that's come out is the impact that it will have on smaller schools, because obviously they have a smaller budget. The other change that's happening at the moment is obviously ARB are removing the Part 1 accreditation as the first step of the changes. I met with the ARB about 3 weeks ago, and that's due to be fully happening in 2027. So students enrolling from 2027 will not be part of Part 1 accreditation. So a lot of it has been left unclear. So the part of the sentiments that I have, others have, is that we've been asked to figure a lot of things out ourselves. So it's not like it's come out from the ARB and it's super clear. Actually, these things are just evolving as part of conversations within schools of how we address the various things that are coming up as a result of this change. As I said before, I mean, it's good that I think some of the positives are that with the relaxing of the criteria, courses can be more free to be creative with the courses that are put in place. It won't be that architecture is scrapped, it's just it won't have the ARB accreditation. But I do worry about a kind of skills gap in that students who have not done architecture technically now will be able to apply for Part 2. But obviously they'll have to do some sort of training before doing that if it's not been a kind of architectural background. It's quite hard. I can imagine if you imagine trying to like do a geography degree and then step into MR, it'd be quite challenging without done anything before that. So I think kind of transition skills course or some sort of foundation before they enter into MArch would be needed. But other than that, we don't know very much more. It's still an evolving conversation that's happening.
So just to be clear, the removal of the Part 1 makes it easier to get into the MArch. Is that very, very simply?
I don't know if it'll make it easier, but technically you don't have to have a Part 1 BA architecture to go into MArch. That's what it will look like. Yeah. So an ARB will just be monitoring and accrediting courses from postgrad onwards. But that capturing is starting now. So at the moment, I'm going through the process of collecting data for ARB. Every year they do an annual capture. It's things like student numbers and EDI, and they're no longer capturing data from undergraduate courses from this year. So it's already kind of starting.
Yeah, it's just it was a big shock, wasn't it? So obviously when all the changes come in, because we've obviously grown up in a world where there is a Part 1 and it's a massive, huge fundamental part of the learning curve, isn't it? And you know, as you said there, imagine even trying to attempt your MArch without that 3 years, and then obviously when you do your Part 1 as well, you know, without some of that experience there. Like I just can't imagine what that's going to look like.
I'm struggling to see the motivation for doing it or the advantages.
I was about to say that. So Victoria, what's ARB's official statement then for justifying that decision?
I don't understand it.
What's the official stance? Do you know?
It's to break it down simply, it circles around inclusivity and trying to make the profession more diverse and inclusive, which is important. But I echo my concerns that we are just looking at the education and who is coming in. We need to be looking at what happens after education as well. Yeah. And there is no clarification on how that's been tackled yet. It's just a future discussion that needs to be had. So it's about inclusivity and tackling the fact that architecture is, and it's not like an opinion of mine, a subject which is hard if you're from an underprivileged background. You know, it's expensive, isn't it? So it's looking at it from that front and trying to make architecture more inclusive. But yes, there are a number of things that it doesn't address, and they're not clear yet. It's not been made clear.
Are you guys at the AAE, are you a part of any consultation, or is it more like individual voices from the heads of schools and stuff that are contributing to this?
So there was a consultation done. I asked for a breakdown from the ARB. It can't be provided, as I understand. The consultation was practitioners, academics and students. What I was particularly interested in was reading and understanding both the percentage of students that had actually taken part in that consultation, and I also wanted to see the feedback comments that had been part of the consultation from students. But I was told this wasn't available and that it was a collective, and that it will be, the consultation feedback results will be released in due course, but it won't be broken down into the opinions of students on the removal of Part 1, the opinions of academics and educators, the opinions of practitioners on the removal of Part 1. It's all in one. So it's not, which I thought was a bit of a shame, because I would have been really, when it was part of the news and kind of coming out, I was talking to students about it, and actually the feedback from them were they were concerned and they felt quite anxious about it. And what I wanted the feedback for was to go back and reassure my students. But apparently it's not available. So, yeah.
Could this in effect oversubscribe the MA then? Because you're going to get a lot of other people who wouldn't have seen it as an option. Like, for example, someone who's done geography trying to get onto the course, and it's going to obviously create a demand. And is the underlying issue like a financial one, where we'll get a lot more people on, but then they're at an amazing disadvantage from the start, because they're probably going to drop out in reality, if you put someone who's done 3 years. And
yeah, there's one risk that comes to my mind is schools of architecture who don't have, let's say they don't have an MArch or a Part 3. What do they do? So the kind of Part 1 accreditation is removed. Does that mean that students are likely to pick a provider that has got MArch and Part 3 because they want to stay there?
Yeah.
The other concern is if you have a very big BA course, which many schools of architecture do, and a very small MArch course, does that mean that you end up with just 2 or 3 or 4 big providers of MArch in the country, and then it becomes kind of a elitist, where there's only, in a kind of elitist environment where there's only kind of 3 or 4 schools that are able to provide that MArch with huge numbers. So it's ongoing.
Well, the fact it doesn't come in until 27 must mean you've got other ideas then, doesn't it?
Well, you'd assume that you'd be able to, that they're going to listen, but I mean, you don't know, do you? And obviously it's not just the educational changes that have changed. It's 100%.
There's no going back. It is happening. So it's just a case of working within the environment that you're in. So at LSA, we're kind of starting to have those conversations and thinking about the potential impacts as we go. And I'm sure all of the other schools of architecture will be doing the same.
Yeah.
But no doubt we'll see the closure of some, I would expect.
Which will be sad news to the students that wanted to attend them or have attended them, I suppose, and everybody that works there. But time will tell, I suppose. To move away from the contentious stuff then, and back into some nicer stuff. The majority of our audience, as you know, Victoria, is students and people who are attending unis and stuff, or those who've just stepped into practice and we're supporting them in upskilling and getting themselves ready for practice life and stuff. And I suppose specifically the students, to be able to watch this podcast with someone, in the positions that you hold, they must be sort of, I can imagine they'd be wanting to ask you for some tips on navigating student life and stuff. So I just wanted to ask you, in your experience, especially because your experience with year ones and stuff in the past, what advice would you give some of our first year students now?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a student that's looking at architecture courses and thinking about going on to do architecture, I would say it's a fantastic degree. You know, it's there's all that feedback out there that it's, you know, really hard and you have to work 24/7 and da, da, da. There's all sorts, all that you need maths and physics, or that you need art to do it. You don't at all. It's an absolutely beautiful degree that will set you up with skills to do a whole wealth of different jobs. You know, you don't have to do architecture. If you're doing architecture, you don't have to be an architect. You know, there's so many other things that you can do after your first 3 years. So I'd say, you know, when you're first embarking on it, look around and think about what fits you. So across the country, there are lots and lots of different schools of architecture that are doing BA architecture. And I think it's important that you find one that you feel comfortable with. So go along to an open day. Do you like the vibe? Do you like talking with the tutors? Do you feel comfortable? Does it feel like it fits you? I think that's really important, because if you feel like the environment is somewhere that you feel comfortable with and you'll be happy, you're more likely to do better because you'll be happy in that learning environment, you feel relaxed. So that's crucial. So don't do what I do and just pick because I was a green campus that you like to go running on. Pick a school of architecture, you know, that fits, you feel really happy in, and that you feel like, yeah, this feels like me. Try and get that match. So going along to an open day, going along to like a taster day. Lots of schools of architecture are doing these applicant taster days, which are fantastic because you can go, you can chat with the tutors, you can do like a little project to get some experience for your portfolio, but also just to see whether you like working with the tutors in that environment, and have a tour of the accommodation. So that's the first bit. Find somewhere that you feel clicks with you and that you feel you can be happy in. And then I think working hard, but also building in breaks. So working 24/7 is an absolute no-no in my book. You just get exhausted. It's not healthy. Nobody is creative when you spent 2 nights, you know, working. It's not a good idea. But working hard and being enthusiastic to learn, I think, is what employers want and what tutors at university want. We just want to see that you're really enthusiastic and keen on the subject. So working hard and kind of good time management is really important for kind of doing well. And then accepting that you can't be the best at everything. So many first year students that I have managed, you know, get quite disheartened if they don't get kind of 80-90% on the first or second assignment, or ever in first year, and recognizing that that's all right. You know, it's a brand new subject. Going into architecture is like learning a new language, and you wouldn't expect to be plonked in France or Spain and suddenly be able to speak fluent French or Spanish. And it's just like that. In first year, you have to kind of learn as you go, and be okay with not being absolutely perfect at everything, but know that you're doing everything that you can in order to build that knowledge and skills from first year into second year and into third year. I want to dispel the myth that first year doesn't count. First year is so important for building that foundation of skills for setting you up to do well in second year. And then when you get into second year, those building on those skills again so that you can really do well in your third year, which, you know, you get your degree output. I mean, lots of courses now are kind of, they've got a split. So there's might be 40% weighted on your second year and 60% weighted on your third year. So that first year is really important, not in terms of marks, but in terms of learning and building that experience and kind of knowledge in advance of going into second and third year. And then also I'd say networking, building your network from day one. So like getting to know practices, going along to local events, speaking with people. Networks are so important in architecture. You know, my whole career I've relied on building my network, and those networks have powered me through to do some of the things that I've really wanted to do. And so the earlier that you can begin to build your own network, the better. So get chatting to those tutors who come in on the review days, you know, nuzzle up to them, give them your business card. You always, those would be my top tips.
Yeah.
Well, we've just done a YouTube video on how to build a website, a portfolio website. And in that, I actually say it's never too soon to make your own website. You mentioned business cards there. I've yet to see it personally, but wouldn't that be so impressive if you were a guest tutor and one of the students had a little business card, maybe a little QR code on, and I said, yeah, just have a little look at my website and there's some personal projects and stuff. There's a member who I've been having a few video calls with, and he's travelled the world doing workshops with different like practices around the world. And I said to him, that's an incredible part of your CV that needs to stand out so much more. And that in itself and in the displaying it properly is so impressive, isn't it? And as you say, if you then tie that into a strong network, you'll absolutely breathe into a job, wouldn't you?
I didn't realise the power of LinkedIn fully for a long time. It can be a social media platform that, it has its negatives like they all do, but generally it is, business focused. And all of, the majority of tutors, practice owners and stuff, they're all on there sharing their opinions and stuff. And I think a lot of the more successful students that we see now are the ones that are active from year one, essentially, and that aren't afraid to ask for help, grabbing coffees with potential mentors early on, year one, if you're struggling, just reach out to a tutor and say, actually, have you got any time for a coffee and stuff, and go and sit down and just get that extra guidance and stuff. It's super important. So I love the network one. And I think, that is the one that flies under the radar because you're so busy getting yourself, learning the language, to use your analogy before, getting up to speed with the language in the new country on the course, that sometimes you don't feel it's time to do it or whatever, but honestly, it is totally worth your while to invest that little bit of time.
I would say though, that because we have touched on this a few times, I would say though, Victoria, you actually probably for me gave the best example of how to network though. It's easy to say do it, but how do you do it? And you said there about local events, and in our area there's the Liverpool Architecture Foundation, and they do some brilliant events, don't they? They do practice drop-ins, they do design charrettes where like the local practices will present maybe in the Baltic and all that sort of stuff. That's how you network, isn't it? At an early age in architecture, go to those events and sit in them and really engage in those forums. I think that's a great starting point, and then you build from there.
Yeah, usually there's like kind of local society of architects, so Birmingham, where I'm based and live, there's the Birmingham Association of Architects, and they'll often kind of put on events, or you can look through RABA, that your kind of local regional RABA. But really the schools of architecture should be sharing news of these events. Or if you've got an architecture society, we've got a really good, enthusiastic DMU SOC architecture, so DMU Society of Architecture. And they're brilliant, and they kind of put on their own events, but also spotlight local kind of events that students can get involved with. And they're really good. And one of my third year students, she's got her own podcast. She actually talks about building up confidence to go to these networking events, because I think as a student maybe you have a bit of imposter syndrome, like maybe I shouldn't be there, or what if I don't know anybody. But everybody is feeling like that, and just going along, and even if you just chat to one person, you've made another contact that you can potentially connect with later. And there's huge power in that. Yeah,
definitely. Right, I'm conscious we haven't got a lot of time, so I want to just let everyone know about two of your passions, Victoria. So the BIM series and Architecture Plus are two absolutely amazing things that you've put together and that you run. We're actually going down to DMU for BIM series on the 8th. Really looking forward to it. So do you want to just touch upon those two things? And obviously at the end of the pod, I'll make sure we link the events and show people how to have a look at them online and stuff.
Yeah, thank you for letting me talk about BIM series. So BIM series is now a registered charity. So I'm very, very proud and excited to be able to announce that.
Well done.
It started as thank you. So it started as a kind of afternoon event, essentially because there were conversations in like 2016, 2017 about how to teach BIM in undergraduate and postgraduate, so building information modelling. And a lot of uncertainty about where it's best placed to teach it and get awareness of it. And then also in practice, especially for small practices, how to go about getting into doing building information modelling. So I ran this afternoon kind of BIM camp, we called it, at BCU. And it was hugely popular. And so I think we had like 200 guests. And I've worked very closely with Vectorworks, so they agreed to kind of support the day with some talks on BIM and software and other things. And I decided to run the event the following year, but as a formal conference. I think from having run the first AAE conference in 2013, that gave me the skills and confidence to be able to do it again. As I said, that was a sharp learning curve, that first AAE conference. So in 2018, I did BIM in Birmingham, which was the first ever kind of global international conference. And it went really well, had 250 guests, global speakers from some of the most famous practices in the country. So Foster and Partners came to that one, Heatherwick Studio, Zaha Hadid Architects, we had Grimshaw's. And it was really, really popular with practitioners and really popular with students. And so I carried on doing it every year for BCU. I think the last one was 2020, and then I did one in 2022, had to miss a year because of COVID. And in that time that I took out between BCU and DMU, that 2-month period, I decided I really wanted to use the conference as a platform to raise money for students in architecture with financial hardship and for the betterment of architectural education. So activities that link in with pushing architectural education forwards. So I started the process of registering BIM in series, which is the overarching group underneath which sits the conferences. So there was BIM in Birmingham previously, and now there's BIM in Leicester. So sponsorship raised through the BIM in Leicester conference will go towards the BIM in series charity. And it's just essentially having the ability to build up a fund that's independent, that can be put to a good cause in architecture. So it's just starting, so it's just registered in January, but the BIM in Leicester conference will be on the 8th of Feb. And it's been wonderful. It's been sponsored by Foster and Partners, so they've been absolutely wonderful at giving speakers and financial support to the charity. And we've also got Associated Architects sponsoring, and a group called People-Led Digitisation. So they've all been incredibly generous, as well as Vectorworks, who have supported the event every single year, giving T-shirts and conference bags and lunches which are essentially the backbone of the conference. But behind the scenes, so I'm doing the kind of main networking. So I'm doing the kind of getting the speakers and the marketing, but behind the scenes of that is a whole team of students, as there have been at the BIM in Birmingham conferences. So there's a group of 23 students at Leicester School of Architecture from undergraduate, postgrad, all working on individual things. So anything from like the graphics and the posters to managing the cake stall, to helping with signage, to social media, they're just involved with everything. And so it's a really good learning exercise for students to get the experience I had in 2013, which is how do you organise a huge global conference, and B, get those skills for the CVs. And a lot of my students have got jobs off the back of these events because they have designed their own business cards, which I will pay for them to be printed. And they'll go and they'll network with practitioners and talk about their work. And they have ended up getting kind of either placements in the summer or full-time jobs off the back of the event. So it's a fantastic event. I've never been to a conference like it. It's really friendly. We have balloons, a big cake sale, BIM cakes with little pencils and protractors, which are brilliant. But as I said, a whole range of speakers from very, very small practices of sort of 5 to 6 people to, practices like Foster and Partners, Zaha Hadid Architects, Heatherwick Studios, the big practices. Yeah. And they always the wow, amazing, kind of awe-inspiring projects. So you get to see a whole range of kind of architectural projects and practices. And we've also got quite a few academics, so they're presenting on like up-to-date research in building information modelling. So yes, so that is BIMIN series. And then Architecture Plus is a newer thing, which is an initiative that I suppose it's got a kind of personal-led approach, because I'm kind of obviously very passionate about EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion, but also my own kind of health. I've suffered with Graves' disease over the last few years. So I've been very aware of how a kind of chronic health condition can impact work. And so Architecture Plus is kind of looking to break down those barriers, I suppose, and spotlight success stories of people working within architecture that have challenges. And those challenges can be anything from mental health condition or physical disability to being a single mum or being a female in architecture. And so it's going to be a very celebratory platform. We have our first event on the 6th of March. Will be an open event at the Leicester School of Architecture, with talks from a range of speakers who are going to be sharing their career stories of success in architecture and kind of spotlighting some of the challenges they've experienced whilst working in education and in the profession. So I'm hopeful for that. I think that goes along my newly found activist theme that as I move into the next stage of my career journey.
No, it's quite inspirational, I think, the Architecture Plus, and I'm really looking forward to see how it progresses. If there's anything we can do to help, obviously, on that first event in March, we're happy to do so. And obviously there's a call. I noticed you were doing a call for speakers. If you still need speakers, then obviously we can promote that on our socials and stuff.
Yeah, it's call for speakers as well as call for stories. So some people want to speak, and in which case they'll be invited to speak on the 6th of March to mark International Women's Day as well. But also we're doing call for stories, which is from anybody. So anybody who feels like they've got a success story to share that can be showcased both on the website and our social media. And also there's going to be an exhibition in Birmingham which will kind of physically showcase some of those stories of people in architecture. And it's not just women, it's people in architecture who have had challenges and can share their career success story. It's
fantastic. Love it. And so we are running out of time. I'm getting some glances from the podcast guys. But we always run over, don't worry. Every time we do one of these, we always run over. Honestly, I think we could probably talk to you for a lot longer, but we're just conscious of time today. So maybe I'll have you on again in a couple of months after some of your workload calms down with running a uni, running BIMIN series, running Architecture Plus. But just lastly, wanted to touch really lightly on the fact that wanted to give thanks to you really for we've just piloted using ArchAdemia for the first time alongside the university, which has always been our aim. And as Adam was saying earlier on in the podcast, we're very much aligned with your own values of wanting to give students just the best experience they can possibly have and help anyway with that. And you know, the pilot with you guys is going to just help us to improve our platform no end, and we want to get it to a point where the unis love it as well, so we can obviously partner with you guys. So I just wanted to say first and foremost, thank you so much for the opportunity. We're going to come down on the 8th, get to meet yourself and a lot of the students and get talking to people and stuff. And it's just really exciting time for us. So yeah, just wanted to give thanks. And do you guys want
No, just I'd have probably said the same. Yeah, just echo that.
Yeah. So honestly, Victoria, thank you from the bottom of our hearts, because we've been waiting for this opportunity for a while, and to finally get it in. It's really exciting for us, and yeah, we're just here to help.
Absolutely. I will just say very quickly that your platform has inspired one of my first years, who's also set up his own platform sharing software tips. So that has just started to happen, and I do think that's off the back of me circulating news of ArchAdemia. So it's really nice, actually, and he's kind of built his own website, and I think it was just great. Came through at the weekend. So hopefully you might have a competitor.
Tell him we'll buy him out.
Yeah, he can come work for us. No, brilliant. And that's what it's all about. And we always said, like, when we started the practice and stuff, we one of the first things we wanted to try and give back in any way possible. And obviously, when you run a business commercially, it's not always easy to do that financially by giving people jobs and stuff. It's not as simple as that. So we found a way to give back by just trying to help with in terms of platform and software tips and things like that.
And mentoring as well, something that's I think missed a little bit. Maybe we need to improve our messaging as well, but there's a lot of members. I've probably had over 50 members now, really, we've had video calls with, and they range from first year students all the way to practice owners. Remember, me and you had a sit down with John, who's just started his own practice, and me and Jack talked him through the steps to when he was appraising a new project. So we were talking about some of the risks on a site, utilities, all that sort of stuff. And he's just set up on his own. He said, this is so nice to feel like I've got partners. It feels like I've got that support as well. And we've offered that support all the way down. And although we do charge for it, because that obviously helps us resource the thing, there is that real, we do really want to help people and give them that much nicer experience throughout. And hopefully the end goal is it actually lifts the entire profession. Because if everyone's a bit more happy about it and everyone's sort of singing off the same hymn sheet, hopefully, fees will return to where they need to be. And as you say, working hours and that culture and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's great to be, shoulder to shoulder with you.
The more people we've got championing that stuff, the better. So
that's it's absolutely,
yeah, it's great to join forces. So yeah, that brings us to the end. Thanks so much, Victoria, for joining us today. It's amazing to get some of your insights and hear like what your day-to-day entails and how you got there. So thanks for sharing all that with us. And we'll catch you soon down in Leicester.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, come for a visit.
Thank you. Thanks for watching. We will tag all of the events and platforms discussed today below the video. Please check them out and we'll see you next time.